talk is called Let's See Your Hat, Accepting Ethical Responsibility for Experience. Our presenter is Stephan. He is XD team manager and practice lead for research and testing at Nerdery, and I will try my best to get through his bio without cracking up. Christopher is a confirmed curmudgeon and chronic overdresser who delights in belligerently wielding over 2 decades of experience and a devotion to human centrism like a blunt instrument. This makes me happy that no one's sitting up front. His first professional website was for MST3K, Mystery Science Theater 3000, the movie, woo, in 1996. Yes, holler if you're old, which aptly set the tone for the rest of his online career to date, including much of the snark you are about to witness. So let's give a totally unsnarky round of applause for Stephan.
There's whistling already. I feel like I may have been oversold. I apologize in advance. So I wanted to talk to you about your hat. Of course, this is a metaphorical hat. This is the white hat, black hat metaphor that I want to kind of get into. And you've seen a lot of presentations today, whether you've been up in this room or down in the rooms below, that have probably given you plenty to be worried about, plenty to think about in terms of what's happening in the market, what are things that you should be aware of in your data usage, the usage and behavior of other people as they develop new technology. But this is really all about you, me and you as professionals working in kind of the technology space, in the communication space, and understanding kind of our role, or at least our responsibility in the work that we're actually doing. This is also an experiment. This isn't a traditional slide deck. This is a real-time board. And I need to be clicked in the right place to make this work. There we go. So, of course, if you have problems, do let me know. You don't necessarily have to shout them out right now, but if you want to tell me I was being a real turnip head at some point during the presentation, I'd like to know that so I can not do that again sometime in the future. If you want to reach out to me, that information is here. And yes, I did vote. And if voting ever made you worried before, I don't see how this could stop you feeling a little concerned about what the electorate looks like. So first, I want to start with your place in the universe. And this is something that I say a lot to new designers, especially people that I meet over at Prime. The work that we do when we do design, whether we're working in digital media, print media, or any other media at all, it has to kind of be understood in its broader context. And what I mean by that is that in order to do our work properly, we need to actually comprehend an entire universe, no matter what the size of our remit is. So if I'm working for a particular organization, I need to know how that organization works with its customers, not just its customers, the people who support the customers, the people who support the people who support the customers, the press who are maybe not customers, the other people who are in that ecosystem. I need to know everything about them just so that I can make an intelligent decision on the smallest part of the universe. I could be given the remit the size of a postage stamp, and if I only paid attention to the space that I'm allowed to work in, I could basically destroy large swaths of a broader universe by making it impossible for it to integrate well with the rest of the experiences, the rest of the brand, the rest of what I'm nascently touching. Because if I'm looking at this little box, there's stuff running through that box. It came from somewhere, it's going to somewhere. Without this broader view, it's very hard to do your work well. So your place in the universe is to understand an entire universe. Now, don't get cosmological on me, and I know it's tempting. You don't actually have to know everything there is to know about astrophysics, but you need to know everything that you need to know about Target to work for Target. That's the universe I'm talking about. It's a certain scale of universe. So you need to comprehend the whole, no matter how small the actual task is. And by comprehending the whole, you can make more intelligent decisions about whether what you're doing right now is a right thing, a proportionate thing, a reasonable thing, a valuable thing. And not just valuable for the client you're working for, or the org you're working for, but also for the customer, that person that they're trying to serve on the other end of that equation, the human in the part of human centrism. So your impact, I like to think about as something that could be measured in people and time spent in a multiplication manner. So I thought about person hours. That sounds nice. Hours are nice and meaty as a measure of time. But powers, that's already a word, and it's confusing. So I started thinking about minutes. So these are now pinits, person minutes. And in a way, for a lot of digital interactions, it's probably as meaningful a measure as you'll ever get, because if you're working in an e-com solution, maybe you're grabbing 5, 10, 15, 30 minutes of someone's day once a week. If you're working on an in-house application that's part of somebody's day-to-day job, you're grabbing, well, you're grabbing hours, full days, weeks, and cumulatively months and years of a person's life. So you can think about the number of people who consume whatever you built, whatever you put out into the market, and the amount of time they're spending in it, and just think about all the pinits you are racking up. Not just this moment, there's everything you've ever launched before that's still out there. That's yours. You did that. You either repaired or damaged the universe, and that damage or repair is still extant. I'll let that sink in for just a second, because it's the sort of thing that makes me nervous and keeps me up at night. So when you think about pinits, and yes, I'm going to keep saying that. I know it sounds stupid, but I'm going to keep saying it. The thing about pinits is that you can't kind of take them back either. Every pinit that you get with a user, what's a person served on the other end of an interaction, is a bell you cannot unring. This is something I try to impress upon everybody I work with when we're trying to make a decision about what we're going to do and what we're not going to do and whether we should or should not do that thing. I was very pleased in the last presentation, if you were here, to kind of hear that, oh, we can do something, but should we? And it dawns upon me frequently how often I'm brought back to the movie Jurassic Park. So that we can do a thing, but did anyone ever stop to consider whether or not we should? There are other corollaries too, but they're not for this particular presentation. So examining your work, because it's not good just because you said so. And now this is an argument I've had decreasingly over time. I say decreasingly because I came up through print and agency work before I got my hands on the MST website and every other digital thing I've been able to lay my mitts on since. And there is a model for selling creative work or selling solution work that is based on confidence. It's good because I've made you believe it's good. It's not necessarily good because it achieved a thing or is actually delivering any sort of measurable value, but it's good because, oh my God, is it cool? You believe it's cool too, right? We're getting paid, right? Okay, we're done. You know, that sort of thing. But understanding that examining work is important because that level of confidence, even if you feel it in your bones, you don't think you're lying to your client, you believe this is the most awesome thing that's ever darkened a pixel in the history of time, you could still be wrong. Now, I said this to my colleagues at the Nerdery about 5 years ago in language that was probably not very helpful. And what I did was I basically said, well, why aren't we testing? There's a problem that we are not actually testing our solutions, because at the time I took a survey and there was like 1% of the work we were doing was actually getting any kind of human-centered usability or otherwise test. And a lot of people got really offended. Okay, I say a lot of people. It was probably more like 3, but they were really loud. And not directly to me, loud in a roundabout sort of way. And the upshot of that was that I was questioning the value of their work. I said, well, you haven't tested. Well, what's wrong with what I did? It was kind of the response that was flowing back in my direction. And the point of that is I wasn't questioning anyone's individual work product. I was questioning whether or not they actually understood the value of their work product in themselves. Had it been examined, or did they just think, because I did it, it must be good? Because there's a danger. No matter how confident I am in any solution I put forward, I don't know that it's really doing what I want it to do, if it's really having the effect I want it to have, until I've actually checked it with the person served. That human centrism connection that I talked about before. And of course, this does mean that you do test your work. And because we are where we are and we work with the populations that we do, that means you do test on humans. And I know that's a little nasty. That's not acid. It's not supposed to be. Anyway, it's not important. But the idea is that the source of truth for everything that we do is that person served. Now, when I say the person served, I'm saying that very specifically because it could be a customer. There are a lot of people who work in customer experience. I feel like the people who work in customer experience are forgetting all the people who are not customers who are also touching that experience. That's another thing that on occasion will keep me up at night. But the important thing is every person served, the front of house staff that are supporting the customers, customers themselves, the people that the customers maybe engage on social media, this universe gets big and it extrapolates itself without much effort. So the important thing is actually testing, and testing in a meaningful way. And that means testing the assumptions. So what did you think that you were going to do with this? What did you think the problem was to begin with? What is the solution meant to do? What are your hypotheses? How do you solve this problem? I think that if I do A, B will happen. And if I do C, D will happen. Hypotheses. You write these down in advance, because if you don't write it down, the Mythbusters will tell you you're just screwing around. Right? Document your hypotheses so you can actually test them in the crucible of an actual person-served experience. Your concept. So you had your hypotheses. If I do A, B will happen. This is where you actually build up the articulation, the strata, the interaction plane in which that hypothesis plays out. I've now given you A so that B can happen. You have to test that concept, because in the translation between this was my hypothesis and this is how I put it on a screen, on a piece of paper, in a physical space, you may have done something weird or wrong, and it may not be a problem with the hypothesis. It may be a problem with the conceptual way that you're putting it into the universe. Finally, there's the solution, the thing that actually goes to market, that thing that can actually start racking up analytics and bringing you all kinds of big data, depending on how people bounce from it and all the other meaningless things that you can get from. Did I say yet that Google Analytics and its default settings are basically meaningless? You don't have to take that from me. You can get that from Jared Spool if you prefer to hear it from him. But how do you then test that in the solution space, that product that actually went into the world, that service that went into the world? And if you've tested at all layers, hopefully what you've seen is you kind of killed your problems at the right moment. And as you move forward, you don't get to the solution space and find, oh my God, the assumption was wrong. I've just wasted the entire project. Or, okay, maybe you check the assumption, but then you decided not to check anything and you go, okay, well, my hypotheses were wrong. My assumptions may have been fine, but my thoughts of A will make B were screwed up, so I still have to rebuild the whole thing. But you can see how the amount of work you might have to do to recover from finding out something is going on that you didn't mean to have happen reduces over time. And again, this is only really meaningful when you're in touch with the person served. Now, I want to be specific about that, because the person served is a very specific person. Now, I say specific, not that it has to be an individual with a particular social security ID or particular genome or genetic makeup. What I'm saying is that the person served is someone who actually is a participant in the system that you want to build or affect, be it product, be it service, be it whatever. That they have an internal natural interest. So for instance, they want to play a particular type of video game. They want to buy a ridiculously expensive object online. These things do happen. I on occasion will shop for lightsabers that cost upward of $500. You don't need to know that. This is how I waste my time on weekends. But the important thing is that if I'm looking for the person served, I need to actually talk to someone who's thinking about the space that I want to offer the solution in, which is why your tech professional next door, the next desk, there's no one in the chair right now, is not necessarily the person you want to talk to. And I will say another thing is that if you're trying to like cut corners on usability, you don't want me to be your test subject, because I'm not going to actually just kind of wade through that experience on the wave of how does it feel and what do I understand. I'm going to be taking it apart from the first pixel. My tolerance for what I might see as shenanigans is super low. So I'm going to give you a bunch of feedback that is probably, one, not reflective of the person served, not for you, and is probably super nitpicky and totally unhelpful. And this is probably true for every other designer you know, because every designer I know can't leave anything alone, and they all think they could have done it better, if they're honest with themselves. So the person served is also not necessarily monolithic. So the person served could have many roles in the system. The person served could be the customer, it Could be a member of the press, could be front of house, could be not just the customer, it could be the customer who buys a certain type of product or buys in a certain sort of way. So these also can kind of dandelion out, snowflake, whatever you want to use for your branching metaphor, can turn into not just one persona, but many personas. I've said the word persona, I need to back up. So I'll say this, there's been a lot of back and forth in the market about personas and whether they're worth anything, and most recent stuff I'm reading is, it's not the persona, it's the scenario. So here's what I'll say about personas. Personas are a consumable item. They have a freshness date. They're a bit like brie. They will go off if you leave them sitting too long. So a good persona is a agglomeration of what I think of as need states or needs. So I've been into the market, I've done some research, I've done some testing, I found out that persons served need things, and that certain persons served need a certain grouping of things. And persons served that need a different grouping of things get their own persona. And as I do my research, I update them and maybe proliferate them and find out that, okay, maybe I thought I had 3, I've got 2, I thought I had 2, I have 6. I get that out of my research, and it's kept fresh through research. The number of people that you're actually getting in any part of the market is based on that research and what it tells you. And some of them are going to be internal. That front of house staff group, the people who are in back of house who are supporting front of house, stakeholders who are having to sign the line for, okay, well, we're going to make this update and it's going to cost us this many hours of somebody's time. There's the external people, these are the customers, these are the press, these are those advisors and people who maybe rate the thing that you just put on the market, who don't buy from you anyway because you gave it to them for free so they could rate it, that kind of thing. And then there's those tangential users, which are like those people who do the ratings, like the press, the people who are influencers and maybe advisors to a large group of people who may not be your real client because they've kind of made a career out of telling people what's good and bad as opposed to actually consuming it, which sounds weird, but it happens. And then, of course, using what you've learned to improve your work. And I have to say this, that the idea of iteration to improve something is hopefully non-controversial. I shouldn't have to say to anybody, it's better if you iterate on it, because the first thing is probably not as good as the third thing that came up with based on feedback that you got. Now, mind you, the power of your iteration will probably have a lot to do with the richness of the test feedback that you got, and the richness of the test feedback that you got will have a lot to do with whether or not you were touching the person served. Because, I mean, you can ask your mom, sure. You can ask the folk down in accounting or legal who aren't tech people, sure. But unless they are identifiably and invested as a member of the population of people served, that's probably not high value, and you could probably do better. But then you use what you learned to improve your work to iterate. And not everyone gets to iterate the way they would like to. Hands up the last person who was able to iterate more than twice on a project before launching. Oh, God. So, yeah, this is depressingly common that we get the idea, we do our research, we do our findings, we decide what we're going to do, we do it, we launch. And iterating is something that happens post-launch. Phase 2, if phase 2 happens, provided you didn't tank in phase 1, or that the person who financed or was interested in you doing that work didn't move to another role in the company, leave the company, lose interest, whatever that might have been. So the ability to really iterate is a little rare in our market. There are places where it does happen. I know people who do it, they're up there. But the important thing is that it's important to actually be able to fight for this and to actually do this work. And also that gives you the opportunity to be strategic. And what I mean by that is to make strategic decisions. Now, I want to be specific about the difference between strategic and tactical, because tactical is, okay, so I'm here, and the basket of laundry is over there, and there may be a cat between me and there, so my tactics are to get to the laundry without stepping on the cat, or something like that. So the strategic decision at a higher level, and it's always at a higher level, it's sort of, my life will be better if I don't step on the cat, is kind of the strategy that informs that particular tactic. And every strategic thought that you're going to have, so my hypotheses again, if I do A, I will get B, that was a strategic thought that we were having way back there up in the chain. So we're able to, after testing, reevaluate our hypotheses, reevaluate our strategies, and maybe make strategic decisions that are now directively different. We will no longer do A, like, for instance, bombard people with a gigantic form that they have to fill out before they can buy a thing. We'll instead do B. We'll have them give us their email, and if they want to set up an account, that's fine, but they can do guest checkout. You know, that kind of thing. Really simple stuff. But strategic decisions, design decisions, which are also, in their heart, business decisions. So hopefully at this point, no one needs to be sold on the necessity of testing. This is usability day, right? I mean, it's kind of like on the wrapper. Okay, good. So I want to talk about your lens and being aware of bias and being aware of privilege, which is challenging. And it's more challenging for some of us than for others, because some of us have swum in privilege and bias all their lives and have not necessarily been obliged to even think about it once. Now, the problem with bias and privilege is blindness. And I think that we can think about this problem as a problem of fluency and literacy, or rather, literacy leading to fluency. And it's so important because when we think about the person served, and the person served in your mind should not look like anyone, should not have demography attached, should not be a person of a certain age, of a certain gender. I mean, unless, of course, you are really invested in the idea that only people of a particular demographic makeup should ever consume your service or use your product, because I'm telling you, you're destroying your opportunity in a whole swath of the market when you do this. When I think about the person served, my bias engages whether I know it or not. In some ways, my privilege engages whether I know it or not. So what I think the person served is informed by my preconceptions, my prejudices about who's going to use this. Why would they use it? Why would they not use it? What's going to put someone off? What's going to get them excited? And sometimes the thing that's going to creep them the hell out, I'm going to miss entirely because it does not creep me personally the hell out. And the fact that it doesn't creep me out may have something to do with the way I was raised, my economic strata, so to speak, my gender, my race, because I mean, there are a lot of things that you can do terribly. Now, who remembers what Facebook did with TrueName? Hands, anyone? A couple people? TrueName told Native Americans that their names weren't real because they wanted to use an algorithm to make sure that you're a real person, not a fake account. Okay, it's good to try to get rid of fake accounts. That's fine. But this is one of those unintended consequences that comes of not understanding what a real name could be. And that was basically a product of privilege gone unchecked. So this is the literacy maturity model. We go from being unconsciously unaware. I'm sure you can think of someone in your life who is unconsciously unaware of their privilege and their bias. You probably work with one. There's one in your family. There's somebody on Twitter. There's somebody. You move from there into being consciously unaware, which is you realize you're being an asshat. Or you've just realized that 10 seconds ago you were being an asshat, and you're not sure how you could have avoided it, and now you feel bad, but at least you're aware that you're screwing this up, which is a step in the right direction. Moving to being consciously aware, which means that you're working really hard to understand what your bias is, what your privilege is, what you probably should not say, and you're having to work at it, and you're going to have to work at it consciously the entire time, because there's every moment that you could kind of just slip back into, okay, I'm just going to say the thing that came through my head first, expose my privilege, and be an asshat yet again. And it's a lot of work to be unconsciously aware, which is you just have internalized the fact that I am this sort of person, therefore I should not say this sort of thing, especially to someone who is not a sort of person like I am at the moment. And there are plenty of examples to be had. You can probably process your own, and I feel like giving examples may be somewhat unproductive. So this is adapted from Jared Spool's Beyond the UX Tipping Point. His maturity model had to do with design maturity. I'm translating it for the purpose of bias and privilege. So you're not the user. You may be nothing at all like the user. So this is something that I hope we all understood. I've already told you that you can't trust your fellow designers, or your mom, or the folk in accounting. I told you to trust the person served. And hopefully none of this is surprising. So the only thing I can follow this slide with is that. There is something worrying that does happen even after we've done our level best with testing, with research. We've gone out and interacted with the person served, maybe not once, but in multiple cycles. There's something weird that can happen after you've brought the data back to the team and you're figuring it out. You're doing your analysis, you're doing your synthesis, you're trying to decide what to do. And in these moments, it is possible to falsify the person served by starting to speak instead of listening. And here's what I mean by that. We can start by letting our presumptions get in the way of what we've learned about our universe. I said we needed to understand the universe to do the smallest thing in that universe. So when we've got our data back and we've heard all of these voices, we could just say, well, all of these voices saying that, they just prove that I was right all along. This is called confirmation bias. And it's terribly easy to find anywhere in the design community, especially when you've got a stakeholder who was sure they were right walking in and will find any way possible to look at the data that you get to prove that they were right all along, because there's politics, there's social stuff, there's ego stuff that gets tied up in that. And sometimes it happens without you noticing. You think you're being clever, you think you're being the expert, you think your team are kind of thinking through all the corners and you think you've got it all worked out, but are you really just confirming your collective or someone's individual bias by letting your presumptions do all the talking? There can also be contextual needs. Now, I'm not talking about a constraint. The difference between a constraint and a contextual need would be this. We've got a trade show happening on the 4th of July. I know that sounds like a terrible idea, it doesn't matter. And the deck or the product or something needs to be ready on July 1st. That's a constraint. You've got a plan. To follow the plan, you've got to do certain things to follow the plan. A contextual need might be, well, we could do that, but then we're going to really irk this VP. Or there's a member of the team who's just not going to wear that, or we can't tell David that the idea that he just put on the table is not going to work, because we all know that when we say those things to David, David basically erupts in a volcanic explosion of emotion and feels, and it takes us the rest of the day to talk him back down. Contextual needs are really about the team. It's what's in the room that's driving decisions and maybe sometimes obfuscating the data that you brought back from the universe. And then there's internal needs. This is the stuff that's going on in your own heads. This is when you're David. This is when you feel really invested in a concept, in an idea that you want to put out into the universe, and a concept that you think its time has come and we're giving it to these people. Which, you know, I mean, the moment you're thinking something like that, back up like 10 steps and start thinking again, because that's dangerous stuff. So the important thing to do is to kind of confront your internal bias through something called metacognition. I didn't make this word up. Metacognition, thinking about thinking. And I like to lean heavily into an author that I like a lot. I don't know if you read much fantasy novels, but Terry Pratchett, who died not too long ago, unfortunately, because I wanted more books, damn it. In his Tiffany Aching books, introduced the concept of first thoughts, second thoughts, and third thoughts. Now, first thoughts are things like, I'm hungry, how about pizza? My neck hurts, why? You know, these sorts of things that just kind of occur to you and they sleep through your brain, stream of consciousness, that's where first thoughts live. And a lot of people are perfectly happy to act on a first thought. That's what an impulse buy is all about. Operationalizing a first thought. But then we can have second thoughts. Now, second thoughts is when you have that, oh, I'm hungry, I want pizza. Why do I want pizza? Why do I want pizza now? Is it because I'm actually hungry and hungry for pizza? Or did I just smell something or see something and that's got me thinking pizza, and that pizza thought has got me thinking hungry? And then there's the third thoughts, which is, okay, why is it every time I smell pizza, I get hungry? And what is it about me over-examining my thoughts about pizza that basically loses me time on Facebook? But this is, of course, shamelessly stolen. I told you it was from Terry Pratchett already. The important thing about this is scaffolding in terms of not just you thinking about your need or lack of need or deep psychological analysis of pizza. It's more about the work that you're doing and the decisions that you're making. So you can think about your first thoughts as your first impulse to a solution. And you can take that first impulse to a solution and step that back to start thinking about, well, if that was my first impulse to a solution, where did that come from? What's motivating me to say this is the right solution, this is the way this should be done? And everyone in the room is going to be doing this, should be doing this on their own before they kind of bring that to the table and disclose the metacognition that goes into that, and then thinking deeply about kind of what the deeper trending of even what you find important to analyze says about your intentions. Now, this is fun, recognizing the bias of others. I showed my son this slide. He thought, you never found that icon. You drew that, right? It's like, no. Turns out that icons are fantastic and wonderful. And if no one has recognized it yet, this thing that you're seeing me do the presentation in is something called real-time board. It's my new favorite toy. If you haven't tried it, I suggest that you do. This is only one of the things that it can do, and this is one of the icons you can get for free when you use it. So now I'm going to go talk to real-time board about royalties or something for advertising. I don't know. But the important thing is recognizing the bias of others through honest observation. And what I mean by honest observation is you're not going to basically call out bias every time David speaks up because David's a pain. That's a whole nother level of bias at work, and you don't need to make things more complicated than they already are. What I do mean is engaging sight meaningfully, which is also stolen from the Tiffany Aching books of Terry Pratchett. We'll talk about second sight first, because second sight, I know, psychics, right? This is my ability to read minds or intuit things that are hidden or know mysteries or something like that. But that's not what second sight is at all, especially not to me, definitely not to Mr. Pratchett. What second sight is what happens when you've seen a thing and you've let your brain decide what it means. So I just got this thing, happened on my app, it turns out my data's been shared, but that's okay. I said that was fine. Or I just saw someone being treated really abominably right around the corner for no reason I can possibly understand, and I'm just going to keep walking because that's normal, right? That happens all the time. So there are a lot of examples of second sight in which you decide to believe what you want to believe, regardless of what you're seeing, and you decide to invest in a design or an idea or a concept or a hypothesis that you have put forward despite the data that's flowed back in your direction. Second sight is common. Everybody's got second sight. What's really uncommon is first sight, the actual processing of the data in front of you. And now that sounds maybe like an overreach. You know, I don't really understand that thing I saw in front of me. Who's seen that video with the basketball players and the gorilla that nobody sees? This is a deficiency. Cognitive, perhaps, but a deficiency in first sight. Because there's more in the universe than we generally care to see. Sometimes there's just way too much in the universe for us to see, and that's a problem of internal wiring. But save that, we should be paying attention, especially when we've gone out into the universe to gather information that's supposed to help us make decisions. So think a bit about your personal lens. Think a little bit about where you have used metacognition, where you've had thoughts about your thoughts to judge the quality of your thoughts, and then thoughts about your thoughts to judge the quality of your thought processing. Have you ever done that consciously? Do you think maybe you did it last year sometime? Do you think maybe you could start doing it tomorrow and it might help? And also think about whether or not you kind of find yourself processing what's right in front of you or processing what you believe about what's right in front of you. And, you know, I mean, I've said this now, and I'm hoping that the upshot of this is that you don't all go streaming onto Facebook and Twitter and tell everybody that they're obviously not using their first sight because they disagree with you. That's not how this is meant to be used, although it could be fun. So a definition of design, then, as a rendering of intent. So this is Merriam-Webster up here, the purpose, planning, or intention that exists or is thought to exist, because sometimes we think there's a plan, but maybe there wasn't a plan, it just kind of happened. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Behind an action, fact, or material object. So design is a rendering of intent. Now this is really easy to understand and really hard to understand for some of the people that find themselves unfortunate enough to be stuck in an elevator with me for any length of time. The point of it being that rendering of intent, this design is not the finished product. It's not the dongle attached to this laptop. It's not the cufflink I'm wearing. It's the idea of there should be a thing. We're going to go somewhere. This is how we're going to get there. We're going to make something. This is how we're going to make it. We're going to do something. This is how we're going to do it. The rendering of intent. And it's important because you can kind of fail at the intent level. What is your intent? Have you examined your intent? What are you trying to do? Why are you trying to do it? Why are you doing it the way that you're deciding to do it? So this is broadly applicable to like everything you've heard today. Now, I apologize for this being low on photographs and very high on theory, but anyone who's worked with me or dealt with one of my presentations before will tell you this is generally how I roll. So what are you doing? Now, I want you to think about the project you're currently engaged in, or the last project you finished, if you're between projects at this time, because I know on occasion that happens. Not all of us are loaded with 5 projects at the same time, at which only one of them may be sleeping at any given moment. So, I mean, pick your favorite or your, the one that's like making it difficult for you to actually get 8 hours sleep a night, whichever, and think about what you're actually doing. What is the intent behind that project? What's it for? What's it going to accomplish? Why are you doing it? So, okay, maybe you've thought a minute about what you're doing, but what is the reason? Did somebody just say to do it? And they just happen to be, I don't know, a VP or a dean or God knows what they were. They must have enough authority to tell you what to do with your time. But is there a reason behind what you're doing? Why are you putting that effort down? What makes the options that you're choosing, doing this thing in this way, the best option? Have you examined more than one? Has there been any exploration? Has there been any iteration at all to kind of help you sift through, well, we could do salsa or oven mitts, and we've decided salsa. Who remembers paste pecan? Oh, God, I'm old. This was a TV commercial once upon a time. You could probably find it on YouTube, some mega conglomerate deciding salsa, oven mitts, and paste says, we do nothing but salsa because we know what salsa is supposed to taste like. But what makes this the best option? What is it about what you're doing that makes it preferable to any other thing you might be doing? To solve the problem or to just focus your time and attention? And then who benefits? So this is complicated, right? So you're going to do this. When you've got your work done and that's now out in the field, who's the one who reaps the benefit of that work? Now, I have to think that your customer, your org, whoever you're with, whoever you're working for, is planning on some kind of benefit, and you probably ought to know what it is. Probably, I hope. You might not know all of what it is. That happens on occasion. And it's important to know who you think, when your work is done, is actually going to come away from this with an improved universe. And who can't benefit? So this is kind of important. If you've built something that's not accessible, yeah, there's a whole bunch of humans who are not going to be able to use this thing. If you've built something that's full of trigger words, there's a bunch of people who the moment they see it are going to run screaming from this thing. Who have you excluded? Who can't use this? Now, mind you, I said buy expensive objects. Now, say if you're in the luxury yacht business, there are a bunch of people who honestly can't engage with you and probably shouldn't engage with you. And the fact that you have a job at all is a little worrying to me, but that's a whole nother talk, so we won't dig into that any deeper. But who's excluded when you're making your decisions? Is there anything about the way you're doing or what you're doing that stops a certain slice of the potential population served from engaging? And at what cost is this being done, and who's paying that cost? So, okay, you're going to do this. You're going to put this product. You're going to get this work done. Is it just person hours? Your person hours that are being spent? Clients' money? That sort of thing. Is that really all this costs? Is there anything that you could be doing instead that may have been more important that you're now not doing because you're doing this? I've had a lot of moments like that with marketing sites. This company really has a problem with how they're engaging with their customers, but instead I'm putting a fresh coat of paint on their logo. And it doesn't seem to be the job that I should be doing. Does anyone know any of this in the project that you're working on? Hands up if you've got what I would call an alarming amount of not sureness about whether or not anyone has given any of this any thought in the project you were thinking about. Oh boy. So yeah, this is a thing. So it's time to examine your own hat. Not done yet, but this is a good moment for reflection. What have you done to kind of think about what you're doing in the course of your day? And I'm not saying that you always get a choice or all the choice that you would like, because there's a lot of stuff that happens in design, in technology, in business, in organizations, where basically you kind of get your marching orders and you go. But that doesn't mean you have to be okay with it. That doesn't mean you can't raise your hand and say something if you smell something bad is happening. If you think that people are being excluded, if you believe that we're solving the wrong problem for the wrong people, that the benefit's not there for the people who need it, that there are people being excluded, what color has your hat been? What color was it yesterday, a year ago? How aware are you of your personal bias that you could maybe filter it out of a process? Or are you the sort of person who walks into a room and feels like anything that you say in that room is just going to elevate it? Because if you're that sort of person, you shouldn't talk to me afterwards. We may end up fighting. So think about your own intent in your project. What are you doing? Why are you the person doing that work? Are you okay being that person doing that work? Are you okay with the work that you're doing? Are you okay with the bigger picture that the work that you are doing fits into? I mean, we're in an interesting market right now. And I'm not telling you that every job or every person in the market will be able to find a job that gives them perfect fulfillment, that they shouldn't settle for doing work for, say, I don't know, agribusiness or industry because that's boring and games are cool. I find that most projects are what you make of them. Their value is the value that you bring. They don't come preloaded with value, with an amazing solution that actually provides real benefit to a real population, but even the humblest of organizations, of applications, of services, of tools can be substantively improved, and you can start racking up positive pinnets in the idea of karma, perhaps. You can always do that. Are you doing that right now? So I want to talk to you about equity of benefit now that you've had a moment to think about your own hat. Now, equity of benefit is a simple equation. In the work that I'm doing, in the product that I'm leveraging, in the data that I am collecting, no matter what I am doing, what is the balance on the org, the product owner, seller, the client, and the person served? Now that person served, remember, is multivariate. There's no one person served. So you have to kind of do this math for every persona you've got. Sometimes a company like Target may find themselves doing this math for an individual who they've stepped across on. This is how lawsuits happen. Equity of benefit. What did I get for what I gave? What did I even give? Did I give you money? Did I give you access? Did I give you data? Do I even know what I get? Who reads all of the EULA stuff? So the fact that we have EULA stuff in the first place is maybe a layer of the problem. Not everyone understands what they're giving. Not entirely, not completely, not in a way that maybe would match up with a legal definition of informed consent. And on the other side, for what they're giving and what they're getting, what is the org, the company, the client, what are they getting? What is their benefit? Because if this set of scales is imbalanced, and let's face it, most business decisions favor an imbalanced scale. And I'm not telling you that balanced scales are easy to come by. There are certain industries and clients that live on an imbalanced scale, and if you balance the scale, they would go under. That's just fact and truth, unfortunately. But if you can't actually achieve equity, you can achieve transparency. So if I go out today and I buy a scratch ticket for maybe $3, I know in my heart of hearts that I may be buying a $3 bookmark. Or I may be getting my $3 back. Or I might actually get more than $3 back and I may spend all of that on more bookmarks. That could happen. It does happen. But transparency, what am I actually giving you? Can you be transparent with me when I sign up for your service in a way that doesn't require me to hire a lawyer to tell me what it is I am giving you and what I am getting back? And this is important because loyalty and trust rests on this sort of thing. So the whole point of acting ethically in design, making design decisions that are for someone's benefit, that are not abusive of their trust, that are not taking advantage of the person served, that strive for equity of benefit or at least transparency in transaction, is about awareness. Now here's a problem. Not all of us are omniscient. I know I'm not. So how do you even begin to address the problem of that awareness? And we do it through research and we do it through testing. Usability being just one of the many methods at our disposal where we actually can gain awareness. We can use these tools to elevate our experience, but we also need to be able to work with diverse teams. And when I say diverse teams, this is what I mean. I mean people who have different life experience than you, who have different professional experience than you, that have different professional discipline from you. So I don't care if you're all visual designers necessarily, but if you all come from different parts of the country, different cultural backgrounds, your parents are all weird in particularly unique ways, you're going to have a stronger team than if you were all very homogeneous, in that you all went to the same school, you all go to see the same films, and basically you basically finish each other's sentences effectively most of the time. Because the hive mind is only powerful when the hive mind has diverse power. It's got more perspective. So awareness is not only what you bring into the team, it's also the ability of the team to react to that wider skill or wider data set with awareness of each other's bias and each other's privilege. So we're nearly at the end. Are you ready? So this is your challenge. This is the charge I'm laying on you. If you like your Terry Pratchett, this is what they would call a geese. Not the kind that lays eggs. G-E-A-S. Understand your reach and the effect of your advice, choices, and your decisions. I'm asking you to do this. I want you to test your work in meaningful ways with the right people, and I want you to use what you learn to improve outcomes for everybody if possible, but in a balanced way. I want you to be humble enough to seek both your own bias and that of others. And let's all be honest, your own bias is probably the thing that you should be paying most attention to. If you're working on your own and everyone else is, you should be fine, but don't let other people's bias squeak by unremarked, unnoticed, or unchallenged. Understand your own intent and that of your team and that of your organization. What are you doing? What's your team doing? What's your org doing? You okay with that? Strive for equity of benefit or at least the transparency that you need in the moment of transaction. If you can't give them equity, at least respect them enough to be truthful. You can do this. We can all do this. Anyone with me?
Yeah.
And before you go back to your projects, think about this for a second. You were here in this room, you had me talk at you for about an hour. If it's not going to be you who raises these concerns, if it's not going to be you who basically puts their foot up to hold back the madness, who is it going to be if it's not you? There's a responsibility here, and we all have it. We're in a pivotal position as designers in problem spaces, helping orgs to make business decisions, even if they're calling them design decisions. There's no one more powerfully positioned to raise these issues. Oh, not that who. But thank you. Thank you for your time.